Hi guys, welcome to the workshop again. Today I just finished building this track speed concept with Sram Red eTap, and I have some experiences that I wanted to share with you and maybe some tech tips that could be useful. So let's start at the front of the bike. You may have seen on my earlier video that originally I put white bar tape on the base bar in a way that I covered up the blips. Unfortunately, I forgot to order the blip grips that would otherwise come here to the base bar. What I have done is I've used some Petex super strong double-sided tape, and I just taped the blips onto the base bar underneath. So I think this is a much needed solution than even the original blip grips themselves. But this creates a problem, because if you try to wrap handlebar tape, even if you do it pretty tightly, then I found that if you keep pressing the button and interfering, holding onto the bars, then it starts to just separate at the blip. So I decided to stick to my trusty skateboard grip tape here, and I've done it in a way that fits quite nicely onto the whole base bar, and I think it looks pretty neat overall. And of course you have much more grip and much less frontal area than with standard bar tape, so that's definitely a good point. This was actually the first time I have ever used the cable adjust feature on these SRAM brake levers. These work in a way that if you undo these little bolts here, then you can twist the whole lever around and adjust the cable tension. And that was because I have taken out the dash wheel, which is mine, and I've put the owner's wheel in this one. And this is an old Zip Super 9 tubular, and it's really narrow, so I had to adjust, but thankfully it was enough to adjust the cable tension here. Then coming to the extensions themselves, obviously no big deal here, but I really recommend, if you can, get the clicks instead. These are pretty fine, but they are quite bulky, so that will be a much neater solution. One problem I found with the blip wires is they are way too long, I think for most setups, because this is pretty stretched out and it's still too long, so I had to put on some shrink wrap in there and shrink wrap them together under this stem cover. And this way I could achieve a really neat fit with a blip box to it, and it's quite well shielded if you look at it from the sides, or maybe from the front of the bike as well. Yeah, it's hardly visible, so that's a good thing. Then if you go further down the bike, of course, the wireless capability of SRAM eTap makes setting up even a quite complicated bike like this very easy. So that's definitely a good thing. One thing I found about the SRAM derailleur, not on this particular bike, but on my Medon when I first started using it, is that if you put on a compact crankset, then because of the shape of the derailleur and the shape of the track carbon frame front derailleur wedge, you can't really adjust the derailleur close enough to the big cog, to the top of the big cog. It still shifts very nice, but it could be better if the tooth was closer to the derailleur itself, but it still works really fine. Then if we go to the Quark, this is a brand new Quark D0, same as mine, but the appearance has changed a bit. My cranks have a complete gloss finish, and this, it might not be as apparent on the video, but only this part is gloss and this one is matte, so that's just cosmetics. The main difference here is that this is 130 BCD, so that means standard double chain set. And I think if you are planning to upgrade to a Quark, then go for the compact chain set rather than this, because if you look at it, this 130, there's quite a big gap here, and if you come to see my bikes, these have both the compact version on it, and if you put aero chainrings on, even if they're quite big, nowadays you can buy big chainrings for small BCDs, so that's fine, and you can still fit smaller, whereas you're limited to the standard basically as your smallest in the 130 BCD, which is not a great thing. And you get, basically because the BCD is so small, the bolt holes are directly at the border of the power meter, so you don't get that ugly gap that is present on the 130. So same thing here. It's just cosmetics, maybe a bit of stiffness, but I think if you are in the market for a new power meter, then you could take this into consideration. Another thing I found with this Speed Concert frame is that somehow the BB90 is a bit like BB92 in these frames, because the bearings themselves are spaced a bit wider apart than on the Madone frame. So with the Kogel setup, this uses a Kogel bottom bracket, and they have a GXP spacer in there, and also a 2.5mm plastic spacer, which should go and replace the wave washer that you normally find on GXP cranks. Well, when I first installed it with the spacer, then I just couldn't tighten the crank without applying too much pressure on the bearings, so they would barely rotate, and yeah, they've over tightened for sure. Then I swapped the spacer 2.5mm for the classic wave washer, but that was still too wide, so this way I have no drive side spacer at all, and it works perfectly. From this angle we can also see the wedge. I've used the middle depth wedge for the derailleur. It's a good thing when you have your setup complete, then you just slide it on and tighten it so it's propped nicely against the frame. You get more stiffness in the system and better shifting as well. In terms of the rear derailleur, this is not the Y-Fly unit yet. Maybe if you're in the market for a new group set, then I would suggest you go for it. Obviously it's not a big deal on a time trial bike if you don't have one by, which you can with eTap, then definitely go for the Y-Fly version, and I think for the road bike as well. Also, this Sram Red eTap system, I have found that it's quite sensitive to chain length and B-screw adjustments, so definitely worth keeping an eye on that. And it's more sensitive to that than, say, a Shimano system. Then if you go to the blip box, another neat feature is that if you want some kind of very special front end setup, you don't really have to use the blips at all, because you can shift from here if you position it correctly. So the buttons are quite small, but they're very tactile, so you can hear that I'm shifting the derailleurs from there. Yeah, that's some signal. And you also have the function button, so you can adjust everything on the fly as well. So definitely a neat system. Unlike Di2, here in SRAM, the blip box itself decides which blip does what, whereas Shimano buttons have their own programs which you can change in eTap, but basically no matter which hole you plug your Di2 wire in, the shifter is programmed to do one thing, whereas on SRAM it's basically the other way around. No matter which blip you use, if you put it, say, in this socket, then it will do this job, and that's it. So that's maybe a useful hint if you are setting up a system like this on the first time. Another thing about the disc wheel itself, yeah, this is as I mentioned earlier, Zip Super 9. I mean, not Super 9, this is the old 900 disc. It doesn't even have the dimples yet, but it's still going to be a very fast wheel. The problem is that no one really makes tubulars that are narrow enough. So if you look closely, it's a 23mm, very narrow course speed tubular. Probably measures out much less than 23mm, but still it's quite a bit wider than the disc itself, which is not very aero, of course, and also the stability of the tire on the rim is not great. This wheel is of course 10 speed originally, but you can turn that into 11 speed easily with a bit of lathe work. This one though wasn't done correctly. It's not something I did, but the freehab basically wedges itself against the cassette, so this is pretty much a fixie now. Okay, so this is pretty much a fixie now, which is not very pleasant, so the owner will need to do a bit of work on this. Okay, so these are my insights, maybe some slight technical hints from today. If you want to see more about this bike, about eTap, about some other cool bikes, then don't forget to tune into my channel and subscribe. It's all for today, thanks for watching and see you next time.